How about thinkers? How's it going? Well, you see, a few days ago I visited an exhibition that I highly recommend for the great work of documentation and research of so many people passionate about the tragic outcome of the Titanic ship, which has so many times been reproduced in so many different formats for more than today 107 years since it sank in April, as you know. Well, my intention with this video is to provide data that confirms the definition of fatality at its best. Already, if we go back to the election of the name Titanic, which comes from the Greek titan in the singular and titanis in the plural, and we immerse ourselves in Greek mythology, we will realize that it was not very successful since the Titans were powerful deities who ruled during the legendary Golden Age. They preceded the 12 Olympic gods, and it was these who were commanded by Zeus to end them in the Titanomachia, or War of the Titans, after which most of the Titans were held in the dark depths of Tartarus. That according to the Old Testament, it was the place where the souls of the dead went, and for the Greeks, it was the underworld. Hesiod, in his work Theogony, defines it as a wet, cold and miserable pit sunk in the darkness. If you join the words dark, depths, dead, underworld, wet, well, miserable, and sunk in the darkness, the result cannot be very optimistic. In fact, there are many testimonies collected from passengers who embarked, and others not, because they felt a very strong negative feeling towards that trip on that ship. Maybe it was the vibration of that name itself. That to begin with. Then we can go to all circumstances these years proven that they wrapped the episode that has captivated us for so long, for its mystery and for the disbelief that still generates today. The Titanic was the largest ship that had sailed the seas, and also the most arduous work for those who had built it. Built entirely of steel and conceived solely for passenger traffic, it did not carry any fuel load that threatened to destroy it. Unsinkable and indestructible. It carried a few boats as required by law. These 24 boats, yes, I've said it right, 24, were secured under the davits on the upper deck, and if necessary would have accommodated 500 passengers. The fragment of the shipwreck of the Titan by Morgan Robertson, the punctual description made by Robertson and the title of the book does not allude to the largest man-made ocean liner that sank in the frozen waters of the North Atlantic, but to the Titan, the great ship of the fiction of the American right. However, both bear chilling similarities. Written in 1898 and with the coincidences that not even history could plan, Sailor Robertson's book tells the story of a great ship that sinks from the collision with an iceberg. Premonitory, the title that went on sale 24 years before the sinking of the Titanic set a precedent for what could happen with a large ship that defies the sea with an indestructible character. Some of these coincidences include, for example, the fact that both were classified as unsinkable vessels, had 3 propellers and 2 masts, were launched in April in Southampton, hit by an iceberg, and more than half of the passengers died during the sinking. Although the book, written by Robertson, may have been lost among the hundreds of thousands of titles that humanity has written, it was granted a place in the world of curiosities for the relationship it has with one of the worst maritime tragedies of the 20th century.
Y esa es otra fatalidad, que tenían un libro que casi lo describía, ¿no?
On September the 20th, 1911, the Olympic had an incident with a warship, the HMS Hawk, which got too close to him, attracted by the turbulence generated by the Olympic, and hit his helmet by opening a large hole in the third cabin's glass on the starboard side and damaging the shaft of a propeller. This accident did not cause injuries. The Olympic, despite the damage, managed to return to Southampton on its own. Right? The ship had to return to the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast to make repairs. The Titanic had to be removed from its dry dock so that his brother could be repaired. Some of the workers were also temporarily transferred to the Olympics, significantly delaying the equipment inside the Titanic. The Titanic was taken back to its dike in November, when his brother's work were completed. In February 1912, the Olympic lost the blade of a propeller and had to return to the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast for repair. These repairs, which lasted about a month, delayed the termination and entry into service of the Titanic again, since the ship had to be removed from the dry dock to enter the Olympic. Another fatality. There would have traveled a smaller number of people if it hadn't been for the coal strike that caused many other passengers of other ships of the shipping company to be diverted to it to collect the little coal they could have and charge them with a coal designated for it, the White Star Line shipping company. In March 1912, entire Europe succumbed under the overwhelming weight of what may be called the first strike of global effects of international economic history. It was not the first English mining strike, but when 1 million coal workers in the United Kingdom stopped coming to work day after day, the consequences for the transport, industry and well-being of more than 100 million Europeans were noted, with serious effects in very few weeks. The miners asked for better working conditions and a salary rise.
Entonces, esto hizo que hubiera más pasajeros en el Titanic, la huelga de carbón.
Another fatality of the Titanic related to coal is that a few days before setting sail, a fire broke out in one of the coal warehouses in the boilers of the ship that could not be extinguished. But that was controlled because, as you know, the coal has properties that once on, it releases a lot of calories and endures a lot of time generating heat, which is what they turn into steam and what moves the machines. However, it took place in the area where the iceberg would subsequently impact, and some theories suggest that without the fire, the hull would not have been broken with that ease. Another is a bad omen, just leaving. The departure of the Titanic from the port of Southampton was preceded by an incident that could cause serious damage. While leaving the dock, a small steam docked at the dock in New York was overwhelmed by the body of water that the ocean liner was moving in its path. His moorings were broken and he began to turn uncontrollably until his stern was pointed directly at the ocean liner. But finally, he managed to avoid a crash that would have destroyed the New York. So, if this collision had occurred, the delay caused by the accident would have forced the Titanic to sail many months later, which might have prevented the iceberg. Another fatality. As for safety, protective bulkheads had been installed in his helmet and waterproof gates that were activated remotely. The novel design of the waterproof bulkheads failed to reach the top. The Titanic had 15 water-resistant bulkheads, But the problem was that the water could pass from one to another, and there was no way to isolate the water entering into the rock. The weight of the water in the bulkheads unbalanced the ship and caused the sinking. Another is that the Titanic had the capacity to carry 64 lifeboats, but only carried 20. There were 4 more than the regulatory number. The day the ocean liner crashed into the iceberg, a planned evacuation drill with lifeboat was cancelled by Edward John Smith, the captain of the ship, for unknown reasons, or perhaps to avoid complaints about the reduced number of lifeboats, which would contain. On the other hand, regardless of the number of lifeboats, many of the boats used during the catastrophe were not occupied at full capacity. For example, the first rescue boat that had a capacity for 65 people and only saved 24. Another fatality. All rehearsed and without nerves could have saved 900 people with capacity but only 711 survived at that time. 6 more died days later. Another fatality was that 13 radio notices were received from different ships on ice fields before the radio failed during the 10 hours it took the operators on board to fix it. The messages of the passage that they wanted to send to the continent were accumulated, commenting on how well they were having, and the operators connected with Cape Race to transmit. The Californian, who was 31 kilometers from the Titanic, contacted them again to insist on the icebergs. As he was so close, he was very strident and had an annoying signal. And as the operator had so many messages to give, he said very angry in Morse code to the Californian, "Shut up, I'm working." The Californian captain asked his radio operator to send it back, but he didn't do it because he was really offended. He turned off the radio and went to sleep. In any case, it would have been of no use, because then the regulation required that if the MSG prefix, Master Service Ground, was not placed in front of the emergency message to indicate that it was a priority, that the captain knew it. He would never reach the Titanic bridge, and he really hadn't. Another fatality. Another one was that the night of the sinking, the sea conditions were extremely calm. There was no moon or swell. There was what in marine slang called cold water mirage. On the evening on Sunday, April 14th, the Titanic was sailing up very calm waters without waves. This was precisely the origin of their tragedy, since the absence of waves made it difficult to locate the icebergs. The white foam of the waves meant that they were breaking against the ice mold. When the iceberg was seen, the appropriate maneuvers were made. Although the frontal crash was avoided, the ship was not able to overcome the obstacle. At 20 to 12 on April the 14th, 4 days after leaving and about 600 kilometers south of Newfoundland, the Titanic crashed into an iceberg. The friction of the Titanic hull, more than 45,000 tons at high speed, against the submerged part of the iceberg toward the steel plates from the starboard side of the ship, about 5 meters below the waterline. Also, the weight of the brakes did not exceed 5 centimeters. They affected 5 of the 16 compartments of the lower deck that began to flood. The Titanic was mortally wounded. For 2 hours and 40 minutes, the ship gradually sank down the front as the stern rose. Just before 2 on April the 15th, the Titanic broke in half and sank forward, with hundreds of people still on board. The fatality in this case was not to ram the iceberg with a bow and try to dodge it. One of the main things that interested the U.S. Commission on the shipwreck was the non-intervention of the VSS.
California.
the SS California. The commission said the California was less than 31 kilometers away, and the ship could have reached the rescue of the Titanic. Two reasons explain the non-reaction of the California: because the radio operator was asleep and could not hear the distress signal sent by the Titanic, and in addition, the white flares launched from the Titanic were misinterpreted by the Californian sailors, who thought the relief flares had to be red.
Ahí hubo también un malentendido. Entonces,
The base of the iceberg was only in contact with the Titanic's hull for 7 seconds and caused intermittent damage that reached the boil room number 5. In total, 6 holes, whose volume of water mass caused the rivets that joins the iron plates to burst still. In the Titanic, everything was of the best quality, except the rivets that joined the hull plates, another fatality. When a team sponsored by the US government managed to raise a good piece of starboard side of the surface to the surface, the hull of the Titanic, and its analysis was carried out in Boston, it was first verified that the steel of the hull with which the dream ship was built was of the best quality in 1912. But when analyzing the rivets that joined the hull plates, it was found that in 12% of the rivets analyzed, the slag mixture was much higher than recommended, and that made them lose a lot of strength, so that when touching the hull against the hardest part of the iceberg just below the surface, the friction made the rivets jump and caused the plates to sink, next to the height of the onboard nail, which allowed to entry of water that it is calculated was 10 times higher than they could extract as a bilge pumps. It must be borne in mind that the Titanic hull had more than 3 million rivets.
Remaches son los clavitos que metemos para luego unir las planchas.
And that 12% of 3 million are many rivets.
Entonces ahí tenía un punto débil.
The engineers and designers of the Ship of Dreams, they did care to take the precaution of not numbering any cabin with the number 13 for a superstition issue and thus avoiding bad luck. No? How ironic, don't you think so? Right? And the last fatality that I'm going to tell you, that surely there are many more, is that there was a lady who survived the 3 ships from the Olympic range. Her name was Violet Constance Yeso, and she was a waitress who worked at the Titanic and Olympic ocean liners and collaborated as a nurse on the Britannic hospital ship. She survived 2 of the most important wrecks of the 20th century, the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912 and that of the HMHS Britannic in 1916. In addition, in 1911 she was in the RMS Olympic when he collided with HMS Hawk and survived. She died of elder in 1971. And I wonder, how much faith did this good woman have in naval injury? Well, it is saying that yes, because if it happens to me, only the Titanic thing, and I survive, I don't get back on a ship for tight. That's for sure. Listen to me. Another reading we can do is that this woman was jinx for others, because if not, there is no explanation. Concerning to the Titanic, there are stories and testimonies of heartbreaking and tender passengers at the same time. But we're going to leave them for another occasion. And that's it. I hope you like it. See you later. Si te gusta el contenido, suscríbete, porfa. Y dale
a todos los vídeos que puedas. Gracias.